Keanu Reeves was mocked by bike dealership workers. They had no idea he's the owner. Keanu Reeves stepped into Arch Motorcycle, his own dealership, on a quiet afternoon. He wasn't there for a test ride or to show off one of his latest bikes. He was there to observe, to see how his workers treated customers when he wasn't around. He'd noticed a few things lately that didn't sit right with him, and today he was going to get answers. Inside the showroom, Jake and Mark, two of his employees, were busy chatting behind the counter. Their laughter filled the air, but it was full of mockery. "Did you see that guy who just left? He couldn't even start the bike. What a clown!" Jake scoffed, clearly enjoying the moment. Mark leaned in, adding, "Yeah, and he asked for a custom-built bike. What's he going to do with that? Look cool in front of his friends?" Keanu stayed in the background, unnoticed by them as he quietly scanned the bikes on display. His face remained neutral, but his mind was racing. He knew how important it was to make customers feel welcome, especially when they walked into his store. He was prepared to see how these two handled their jobs today. After a moment, Mark noticed Keanu standing near the motorcycles. He shot a glance at Jake and then called out, "Hey, you looking for something or just wasting time?" Keanu remained calm, taking his time to examine a custom bike. He didn't respond right away, letting Mark's words hang in the air. Jake, now looking at Keanu, grinned. "We've got some beginner bikes in the back, if you're not sure what you want." He looked Keanu up and down, sizing him up like a stereotype, underestimating him without even realizing it. Keanu finally turned to face them, his eyes steady and focused. "I'm just looking, but I'll know exactly what I want," he said, his voice smooth yet firm. The workers exchanged glances, a flicker of doubt in their expressions, but neither of them backed down. They didn't recognize the man in front of them, so they carried on with their dismissive behavior. Keanu continued to browse the showroom, taking note of the bikes, with a quiet intensity. But his focus wasn't just on the machines, it was on the workers. Jake and Mark, oblivious to who he was, kept up their casual mocking of past customers, unaware that their behavior was being watched by someone who could make their lives very different in the blink of an eye. Jake leaned over the counter, still chuckling. "Man, you should have seen the guy earlier. He was like a deer in headlights when we asked him about the specs of that bike. Not a clue what he was talking about." He paused and shot a glance toward Keanu. "Bet this guy's the same. Doesn't even know how to look at a bike properly." Mark nodded in agreement, but as Keanu walked closer to the counter, he faltered for the first time. He felt the weight of the silence that had settled around them. He hadn't expected the man to be so still, so composed. Something about Keanu's presence felt different from the usual customers who came in and left with only a few words. Mark's uncertainty grew, but Jake was quick to laugh it off, trying to regain control. "What do you think, old man? Ready to buy one of these bad boys or just taking up space?" Keanu's gaze shifted to the bike behind the counter. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked toward it, his steps slow and deliberate. The workers watched him, still unsure of what to make of him. He looked like someone who knew exactly what he wanted, but the mocking behavior hadn't stopped. Keanu stopped beside the bike, feeling the tension in the room rise. He wasn't here to make a scene, but he wasn't about to let them continue their disrespect. Finally he spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight. "You're quick to judge people based on how they look or what they know, but you might be missing something important." His eyes were locked on Jake and Mark, who froze under his gaze. They had no idea that the man standing before them was the very owner of Arch Motorcycle, the one who had built this place with passion and care. The air hung thick with a sense of unease. Keanu hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made any dramatic gestures, but his presence was enough to make both men start questioning their own actions. The seconds seemed to stretch on as Keanu's words hung in the air. Mark and Jake exchanged a brief, uncomfortable glance. The mocking tone had faded from their voices, replaced by a subtle, creeping uncertainty. Jake was the first to break the silence. He shifted his weight on the stool, his smirk faltering. "What do you mean?" His voice was less confident now, almost defensive, as if he could feel the tension shifting in the room but didn't know how to handle it. Keanu didn't answer right away. He continued to examine the bike, his fingers tracing the intricate details of the frame as if waiting for the right moment. He could feel the workers' eyes on him, but he wasn't rushing. There was no need. He was in control, even if they didn't realize it yet. After a long pause, Keanu finally spoke again. His tone was still calm, but it carried an undeniable edge. It's not about what people know or how much they have. It's about respect. When you mock others, you lose sight of what truly matters. The words hit harder than Jake and Mark expected. Both men looked at each other, uncertainty creeping in. They had no idea why this man was so focused on respect, but for the first time they began to question their own actions. Jake scratched his head, his mind racing. There was something about Keanu that felt different. Maybe it was his calmness, or maybe it was the way he spoke, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. They had no idea who he was, but why was he so intent on teaching them a lesson? Mark, on the other hand, tried to laugh it off, desperate to regain control of the situation. "Come on, man, relax. We were just having a little fun. Don't take it so seriously." But Keanu wasn't smiling. He turned his gaze from the bike to Mark, his eyes steady and unwavering. "I don't take it lightly. You should consider how you treat people. It's not just about business, it's about dignity." The words struck deep. Mark's bravado faltered, and he hesitated. He had never thought of it that way before. What did dignity have to do with his job? He felt a pang of guilt, something unfamiliar. And Jake, who had always prided himself on being the loudest in the room, suddenly found himself silent, unsure of how to respond. The dynamic in the room had shifted. The workers were no longer the ones in control, and Keanu had planted a seed of doubt in their minds. The truth was they were beginning to feel the weight of their actions, but they still didn't know who this man really was. Keanu's calm presence had done what the workers never expected. It made them uncomfortable, in a way they couldn't ignore. The atmosphere in the showroom had shifted from casual mockery to something much heavier. Jake and Mark stood frozen, trying to hold on to their pride, but feeling the weight of Keanu's words sinking in. Mark, still trying to deflect, cleared his throat and forced a grin. "Look, man, no need to lecture us. We were just having some fun. We're good at what we do, all right?" But Keanu didn't flinch. His eyes remained steady, calm, unwavering. Fun at someone else's expense isn't fun. You may be good at your job, but there's more to it than just selling bikes. The words stung, but neither Jake nor Mark could find a sharp retort. The harshness of the situation was starting to settle in, and for the first time they both felt vulnerable. Keanu wasn't just criticizing their actions. He was questioning their values, something neither of them were used to. The tension was unbearable. The room was silent for a moment, just the sound of the air conditioning and the soft hum of the lights. It was then that Jake felt something stir within him. The thought began to creep into his mind. What if this guy is right? He shifted uncomfortably, his face starting to lose its cocky grin. Okay, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe we crossed the line a bit." His voice was quieter now, more reflective than before. Mark stood still, staring at Keanu. He was the more stubborn one, the one who prided himself on being tough. But something about Keanu's unshaken composure was getting under his skin. He felt a flicker of doubt. Had they really gone too far? Had they disrespected people just for a laugh? Keanu let the silence hang in the air, letting them process his words. He wasn't in a rush. He knew they were starting to question their actions. Then finally, the revelation struck. Jake hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his voice softer this time. "Look, man, I get it. I really do. We shouldn't have treated people that way." He paused, glancing at Mark for support. But Mark was silent, his gaze still fixed on Keanu, a realization dawning on him. "But why do you care so much?" Jake asked. Keanu's lips curled into a slight, knowing smile. "Because I built this place, and I built it with respect for the people who come through that door, whether they're experts or beginners." Jake's brow furrowed. "Wait, built this place?" Mark's eyes widened, and in an instant, the realization hit them both like a ton of bricks. Keanu wasn't just a customer. He was the owner. The very person who had created Arch Motorcycle. The room seemed to shrink as the truth finally settled in. Jake and Mark were left standing in front of Keanu, their expressions a mix of shock and guilt. They had mocked him, insulted him, and only now did they realize who he really was. The man they had been belittling wasn't just another customer. He was the owner of the dealership they worked for. Jake swallowed hard, his usual bravado gone. He took a step back, his hands fidgeting nervously. Oh, I didn't know. I didn't realize it was you, he stammered, his tone now apologetic. Mark, who had been trying to maintain his tough exterior, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze dropping to the floor. The tough guy act was fading fast. Yeah, man, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to disrespect you. It's just, we were messing around, you know. Keanu, who had remained calm through the entire exchange, watched them carefully. He could see the genuine remorse beginning to surface, but he wasn't going to let them off too easily. He believed in lessons that stayed with people, not just quick apologies. You know, Keanu said, his voice still calm but carrying a weight that demanded attention. It's not about realizing who I am. It's about how you treat people, the respect you show them no matter who they are. Jake and Mark nodded, but the words stung. They hadn't fully understood before, but now the lesson was clear. It wasn't just about Keanu. It was about the people they interacted with every day. The customers, the strangers, everyone. They had been treating them with arrogance and disdain, and that wasn't the way to run a business, let alone live with integrity. Mark cleared his throat, a hint of sincerity breaking through his usual tough guy demeanor. You're right. We were jerks. We didn't think about it like that. He paused, taking a deep breath. I'm really sorry, man. Jake stepped forward, a more genuine expression on his face now. Yeah, same here. I should have been better. I'm sorry for disrespecting you. Keanu nodded slowly, acknowledging their apologies. But instead of offering a quick dismissal, he gave them one final lesson that would stay with them long after they left the showroom. You can apologize all you want, Keanu said. But the real change happens when you start respecting people every day in every interaction. That's the only way you'll grow. Not just as workers, but as people. The words hit home. Jake and Mark stood there, their heads lowered in thought, fully absorbing the weight of what Keanu had said. For the first time they understood that respect wasn't something you could demand. It was something you earned, not just from customers, but from everyone around you. Keanu turned to leave, his task complete. But as he reached the door, he stopped and glanced over his shoulder one last time. Remember, he said, his voice soft but firm, it's not about how much you sell. It's about how you treat the people who walk through that door. And with that, he walked out of Arch Motorcycle, leaving Jake and Mark to reflect on their behavior and on the lessons they would carry forward from that day. Later that afternoon, the first customer walked in, a man in his mid-30s, dressed casually, looking a little unsure as he surveyed the showroom. Jake and Mark exchanged a glance. This time there was no mockery in their eyes, no condescension. Instead, they greeted the customer warmly, offering assistance without judgment. They took the time to explain the features of the bikes, answered every question with respect, and made sure the man felt valued, something that had been missing before. As the customer left with a new bike, smiling and shaking their hands in gratitude, Jake and Mark shared a glance once more. This time there was no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding. Keanu's words had stayed with them, and they had changed the way they saw their work and the people they interacted with. It wasn't about showing off knowledge or feeling superior. It was about building a relationship, one based on trust and respect. And as Keanu's visit echoed in their minds, both Jake and Mark knew that they had been given a second chance. Not just to be better employees, but better people. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more lessons that can change the way we see the world. Thanks for watching.